We are constantly judging. I mean, we spend a huge percentage of our mental energy every
Mhm.
single day
Yeah.
just acting as the judge, jury, and executioner of our own actions.
And everyone
And
else's.
everyone else's, absolutely. We look at the finish line or the public mistake or that, big visible achievement, and we define ourselves and others by the result. It's almost always about the what.
Well, it's the easiest metric to use, isn't it? Our brains are just wired for efficiency. If the action we see is good, we think, okay, the person is good.
Right.
If the action was destructive, then they're bad. But the radical idea Mark Wells pushes in the source material we analyzed is this. What if what the visible action matters so much less than the why?
And that shift in focus, that's precisely why this deep dive is so powerful.
Mm.
Because at the core of every single human action, no matter how small or how huge it seems, there's a deep-seated driving intention.
Hmm.
And here's the really profound part. That intention is often trying to do something we don't even consciously realize. It's hiding just below the surface.
Exactly. And our mission today is really to give you a framework, kind of a shortcut to self-analysis and interpersonal understanding.
A shortcut. I like that.
Yeah. By shifting your focus from the surface action to the deep root intention, you can unlock these profound levels of self-compassion and genuine forgiveness, both for yourself, when you inevitably mess up,
Which we all do.
and for others when they fall short. This idea is, it's genuinely transformative when you really let it sink in.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the core metaphor here, because it really helps visualize this whole internal reality.
Right. The idea that our actions are just the visible surface.
Yeah, the source material uses this fantastic tree of life analogy, which I think just makes the idea click instantly.
Hmm.
So think of your life as this enormous tree.
Okay.
The actions, the things the world sees, those are the fruit. Sometimes that fruit is sweet. It's the positive outcome, the helpful deed.
And other times it's bitter. It's the mistake, the harsh word, the failure.
Exactly. But here's the key. The quality of that fruit, how good it is completely determined by the health of the roots. And the roots, in this case, are your intentions.
And that analogy just perfectly illustrates how complicated human motivation really is. It shows how a seemingly great, sweet piece of fruit can come from a pretty complicated, maybe even diseased root system.
So let's look at an example. The source uses the charitable donation.
Ah, yes, the classic good action.
Right, we see it all the time. Someone makes a big, very public donation to a worthy cause, a hospital, a university, whatever it is.
So the action, the fruit you can see is undeniably positive. It helps people, it provides resources, it's seen as a good thing. But if we, or even the person themselves, were to dig into the root, the intention, what might we find?
Well, you might find they're doing it out of something far less noble than just pure altruism. Maybe they're just terrified of being seen as a bad person by their friends.
Or maybe the real motivation is getting a tax break or getting that public recognition that fills some deep hole of insecurity.
And that fear, or that need for validation, that's the complex root. It's not pure generosity. It's a kind of defense mechanism that's just dressed up in expensive philanthropy.
And while the good outcome of the donation is still real, the internal cost for that person can be huge if they're always operating from a place of fear.
That really complicates the moral picture, doesn't it?
It does.
If the action is driven by some deep internal defense, it means the root is mixed. So judging that person just by the surface action gives you a totally incomplete and maybe even inaccurate picture of their inner world.
Right. And the growth needed isn't to stop donating, but to actually address that root of fear. If you only admire the fruit, you never fix the diseased root that's going to cause problems later on.
Okay, so we've looked at a good action with a mixed root. That's, fairly safe territory. But the real test for me is applying this to the stuff that really hurts. The actions that are on the surface just plain bad.
Yeah.
How do we look past that bitter fruit?
Well, this is where the tool becomes most vital for self-compassion, I think. It lets us analyze our failures instead of just condemning them.
Right.
So take the common example of snapping at a loved one or a colleague. We've all been there.
Oh, absolutely. The fruit is absolutely bitter. You're aggressive, you say something harsh, you're critical, the outcome is pain for the other person, and usually deep shame for yourself.
Society judges that action very harshly, and shame is the immediate reaction. But if we can just pause, look beyond the snap, and examine the root intention, the source suggests that deep down, that outburst was almost certainly an attempt to protect yourself.
Protect yourself from what, though? How does that work in the moment?
It could be anything. Maybe you felt extremely vulnerable because you hadn't slept, or you felt totally unheard because you'd spent all week trying to get a point across.
Or maybe you were just overwhelmed by stress from work and you lashed out defensively to get some control back in the only place you felt safe enough to do it.
Exactly. The execution was clumsy and horrible, yes, but the deep down intention was just self-preservation. It was a cry for help.
That reframes it entirely, but here's my immediate question. If we just excuse bad actions by saying, oh, I was just trying to protect myself, doesn't that sort of remove all accountability?
That is the essential balance, and the source is really clear on this. Understanding the intent doesn't excuse the behavior, it diagnoses the problem.
Ah, okay.
The framework insists you have to take accountability for the hurtful action, but you don't have to follow it up with just beating yourself up about it.
I see. So if you only judge the bitter fruit, I'm a mean person,
Yeah.
you just sit in shame, which gives you nothing to work with.
Exactly. Shame is paralyzing. But if you look at the intent, you move from self-condemnation to self-investigation. You understand the root. I was trying to protect my vulnerability because I felt cornered. Now you know what to address.
Not the action, but the vulnerability.
Yes. And the inability to communicate it better. That's where the real growth happens. We learn nothing from the snap itself, but we can learn everything from what caused it.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Because the hardest part of all of this is applying this to ourselves.
Yeah.
We are master self-deceivers. We create these elaborate stories to justify our actions, and we actually believe them.
Oh, that's absolutely right. Psychologists often point out that our deepest intentions are buried in the subconscious, the part of us that's really running the show without telling the conscious mind. We are so often not the masters of our own house.
Right.
We tell ourselves one story about why we're doing something, but there's this much deeper drama unfolding underneath that's actually pulling all the strings.
Which brings us to that famous iceberg metaphor. It just fits perfectly here. The intention we consciously understand, the one we tell ourselves and our friends, that's just the tiny tip sticking out of the water.
And 90% of the motivation is hidden, driving us invisibly through these deep-seated defense mechanisms. And this hidden drive explains so many of our most persistent and, unproductive behaviors.
Let's look at the two examples of self-deception from Mark Wells's work. The first one is the person who's driven by professional ambition, or so they think.
The classic scenario. The person whose conscious thought is, I have to work late every night, I have to work weekends, I need to be productive to get ahead.
It sounds so noble. They're a diligent worker, a pillar of discipline.
But if you dig deep beneath that rationale, what's the deepest intention? You might find they're working late not to be productive, but simply to avoid going back to a lonely or emotionally messy home.
The office becomes a refuge, a controlled environment where their unmet emotional needs, like avoiding conflict or loneliness, are just temporarily solved by the structure of work.
Precisely. The action serves a totally different emotional need than the one they consciously admit to. In the short term, it works. They escape the discomfort. But long term, they confuse that emotional avoidance with ambition, and it leads to burnout.
And it's so hard to fix a problem when you fundamentally misunderstand what the problem even is.
It is. And the source gives us another great social example of self-deception, this one about honesty.
The brutally honest person. We all know one.
We do. And their conscious thought is, I am telling this harsh truth because I value authenticity and someone just needs to hear it.
But what's really going on under the surface?
Well, the deepest intention, the secret root, might actually be a burning subconscious desire to feel superior. By pointing out flaws in others, by delivering that harsh truth, that person gets a momentary rush. They elevate themselves.
So it's not honesty at all. It's a power play designed to prop up a shaky sense of self-worth.
That's it. And this is so vital for you, the learner, to grasp. The subconscious drives a huge number of our actions, and it prioritizes our emotional safety above all else. Until you're willing to look under the waterline of that iceberg and question your why, you'll just keep repeating the same behaviors.
So if we accept this shift, if we agree that intention, however messy and hidden, is the real engine of our lives, what's the immediate power in that? How does this knowledge actually change things for us today?
It creates two incredibly powerful psychological shifts. It moves us away from that useless shame and toward real growth. The first, and maybe the most important, is self-compassion.
Which is what we almost always lack when we mess up. We go straight to self-judgment.
Right. When you only look at the mistake, the action, you fall into that trap of saying, I'm a failure or I'm a bad person.
Global judgment that's so toxic.
It is. It shuts down growth. But with
Mhm.
the intention perspective, you stop dwelling on the what and you start asking, okay, what was I trying to protect deep down when I did that? What unmet need was driving me?
So you stop being a judge and you become a detective instead. It turns a moment of shame into a moment of self-discovery.
It gives you the tool for real sustainable growth. You can actually address the root fear or the root need. If you just keep policing the surface action like vowing you'll never snap again, you're just trimming the leaves without treating the root rot.
And what's the second key benefit?
It's forgiveness, applying this same lens outward to the people who hurt us. It's almost impossible to forgive someone when you're convinced their only intention was malice.
That's the classic mistake, right? Viewing the person who hurt us as the villain in our story.
Yes, but the source material offers this profound, almost tragic framing. When others hurt us, they are usually acting as clumsy puppets of their own deep-seated fears and needs.
Clumsy puppets. Wow, that's a memorable phrase. It suggests their hurtful action wasn't really directed at you personally.
But was an overflow of their own internal
An
chaos.
overflow, yeah.
It shifts the entire dynamic. When you see their action as a sign of their own pain or fear, it just deflates the personal sting. It helps us stop seeing them as villains out to get us and instead see them as maybe hurting people who just executed a bad plan poorly.
But let's be real for a second. This sounds great, but how do we apply this when the pain is severe? If someone betrayed you, it's not so easy to just look past that and see them as a clumsy puppet.
It is absolutely not easy, and this isn't a magic bullet, especially when the wound is fresh, but it offers a path forward after the initial shock. This perspective gives you the intellectual distance you need to heal.
Yeah.
It lets you separate the person from their action and realize that the betrayal was ultimately about their inability to cope with their own internal pressures, not a reflection of your worth. It's the knowledge that unlocks the possibility of freedom from that grudge.
So what does this all mean? The ultimate takeaway from this deep dive is that you are not just a list of the things you've done. You're not your resume or your mistakes or your achievements. You are a complex world of deep drives and quiet hopes, many of which you haven't even met yet, and which often dictate your life from the shadows.
That is the essence of understanding this hidden compass. By looking past actions, your own and others, and daring to peer into the heart of the matter, you start to understand the why behind the whole story of your life.
You move from just observing the storm to understanding the atmospheric pressure that caused it.
Well said.
And that leads us to the final provocative thought for you to carry forward with you. If our deepest intentions, even the ones hidden from us, fundamentally shape every single action in our lives, what is one hidden intention driving your behavior today, maybe an intention to avoid something or protect yourself, that you're finally ready to uncover and bring into the light?
Because that moment of diagnosis, that's where the real work begins.